Good morning, everyone. My name is John. Welcome to our Sunday morning class with Guy Finley, and a special Happy Mother's Day to the mothers both in the room and those of you joining us online. Glad that you're here with us. Our agenda, if you're new to this meeting with us, our agenda is in a moment. Guy will give a talk that will last about 60 minutes on the topic that those of you online see on your screen below, and then after Guy is finished, we'll take a 5-minute break and then come back for an open dialogue, a discussion with Guy in which those of you online can send in written questions. Some of you can, even if you're on GoToWebinar, can raise your hand and talk directly to Guy, and the students in the room as well can participate in the discussion. And as always, the objective of that is to deepen our understanding of what Guy just presented today. So we hope you'll take a full advantage of that, and our session will last about up to 11 o'clock, 11:30 our Pacific time. And if you can't stay for the whole session, we do record these, and you can return to watch them on our GoToWebinar archives. I think with that, just a reminder to the students in the room, if you have a cell phone, do check and just make sure you've turned it off before we continue. And with that, I'll read this morning's title and key lesson. Our title this morning is 3 Living Prayers to Make the World a Lighter, Brighter Place. And here's the first key lesson of the day. The only thing good about any negative reaction is the revelation of how useless is that level of suffering to change anything about our present nature, let alone the condition it convinces us to blame for its pain.
Good morning. And in a perfect world, all the men would leave and I would just have the ladies. Should we make it happen, ladies? I'm torn because if I don't say Happy Mother's Day, I'll get emails saying, why didn't you say Happy Mother's Day? Which is why I don't say Happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. Pretty tricky, huh? A couple of comments. I hope I can make them brief, leading into the material. The only one who can know the whole story of your life is you. And the only way you'll ever know the whole story is if you participate in the life that gave it to you. And everything else misses the mark. And so I don't pretend when I sit here and speak to you, share the things that I've seen. I don't pretend that it's a complete story. That's ludicrous. You could read every book that was ever written on the subject of Christ or development or self-realization, liberation. And by and large, unless something took place in you that can only take place as a result of the grace of God, all you are is a walking dictionary filled with the conflict that comes with thinking that you know something while acting out the evidence that you do not. So I say this because I'm going to cover certain things with you today, some of which is from Christian Scripture. I don't pretend to be an authority of any kind. I do my diligence. I understand from my own work the meaning of things. But my understanding of the meaning of things is useless to you unless you take what you hear as it resonates within you and turn it into some real-time experience, what I'm going to call, for the sake of this talk, a living prayer. We've spoken of late this idea, and one of my favorite from St. Paul, who was suffering much as you and I do, to whatever extent that's true, from the fact that he was forever doing the evil he would not instead of the good that he would. And his suffering wasn't that he was doing the evil that he would not. His suffering is that he understood he was involuntarily committed to a will that was against what he knew was good. That was his suffering. Of course, there's suffering when you do what you don't want to do. But if you actually suffered when you were doing what you don't want to do, you would stop doing it. So you're not aware of the suffering that you do when you do the evil you would not. What you call suffering is your judgment of it that follows after you have been taken over by a will that has nothing to do with what is good. Am I going too fast? Whose will? You really don't question it. It's like that. You know what? I'm angry. I spoke in these tones. I interrupted this person. I said that cruel remark. I was sitting there. They didn't know what I was thinking. Thank God, because if they knew what I was thinking, they would want nothing to do with me. How many of you know that? And it never dawns on you, who in the name of God is thinking for you, let alone doing what those thoughts push it to do. And that's what we're going to look at together. Is that somehow or other, if I knew that I was incarnating something that wasn't just set against me, but every human being that I come into contact with, I wouldn't be that incarnation if I knew it. So the task before us isn't to try to prove to ourselves that we're good people the way human beings want to, and why this particular church has, well, of course there's hundreds of people joining us online, but that's not the point. Human beings are always looking for some way to explain to themselves their involuntary negative states. And they always have a promise just down the road someplace of something that will save them. Even if they have to die in order to go to heaven, well, they'll be saved. And by the way, no such Savior exists that is going to take you as you are into any kingdom. Would you want to be in a kingdom where you are? There's no magic redemption. If and when I have a negative reaction, which is quite common, we don't even know they're negative reactions anymore. We're so used to being pushed around. Have you noticed, as we've discussed, so I can cover this quickly, that whatever the nature is that's reacting to that moment you don't want, it was there before the moment you didn't want. So that sense of myself I didn't know was living somewhere in this legion of my unconscious. Suddenly, I am on fire. I didn't make fire. I am on fire. I am frustrated. I am impatient. I resent you. And I didn't even know that I had that kind of bitterness, that kind of grief inside of me until a condition brought up something out of that consciousness that I had no awareness lived in that consciousness. Yes? So we cover that. But the rub is that when it comes up, it doesn't just come up like a gaseous bubble in an old pond with stagnant material. It comes up, and I'm carried away with whatever it is that it comes up with to explain or justify why it is that I feel the way I do. So that I actually incarnate the feeling of that unconscious nature that was there before me, now expressing itself, and I become its mouth. I become its facial expression. I incarnate it, yes or no? How, if you've struggled at all, and you wouldn't be joining me here if you are, or in this room, if you hadn't struggled somewhat with that, we've all struggled, have we not, with that? How are we to ever, I mean that, you have hope in the future, and that's part of why you're dying. How am I ever going to be a different human being if everywhere I go, a nature that I don't know has gone before me and decided who I'm going to be and how I'm going to treat others? How am I ever going to be a different human being? When I've struggled mightily with it, I've practiced this, I've practiced that. I hear from students all the time, grateful students, by the way, who say, thank God, because I did this, I went there, and finally I'm starting to understand what I couldn't understand before. Bring up the second key lesson, please. Read along with me. That's the first key lesson. Thank you. Bring up the second. Thank you. Can we be sharper than that? It was already up and I looked at the wrong screen on my thing. Good. I wish I could be sharper then. I need eyes behind my head. For billions of human beings around the world, the idea of surrender is believed to be the winning strategy. But true surrender is inseparable from a conscious sacrifice of oneself, born of realizing the following truth. There's no strategy by which it becomes possible to win any form of peace that we've imagined. That's what churches are filled with, the winning strategy. Just say this, do that, say you're like this, say you won't be that way. Imagine the abundance to come. Just think how beautiful it'd be when you're joining Christ in some promised land that never quite appears, but it's always just down the road. That's the winning strategy, and that's what's suffocating humanity and its possibility of ever knowing anything at all about the living Christ, the true life. There's no strategy. When you get negative and then you explain to yourself why you got negative, doesn't it include a strategy? I won't be like that again. Isn't that your strategy? Suffocating on strategy composed by an unconscious mind for the sake of hiding itself from anyone who might begin to become suspicious that the real problem is not the conditions they face, but that the consciousness they're identified with constantly is telling them who they are and what they need to do to be free. So I want to give you some self-knowledge. The knowledge won't be yours. I'm just pointing to facts, fragments, as I increasingly think of them. Things that sit inside of a mind that has nothing to do with thought at all, by which and in which it's possible to start catching glimpses of facts that determine our relationship in life with each other and with ourselves. Let me get into it. This is an introduction to the main talk, what I'm giving you now. We live in a world that most of us have, or I should say, we live in a world that most of us, the only thing we're curious about it is what can I get from it? That's about it. My relationships, what can I take from them? How will they prove me to be as I imagine myself? And how can I get from what the world can give me the sense of security that seems so evasive to me? This is the way we look at the world. And the way we look at the world by the very nature of seeing it as a supermarket of unwanted suffering or superfluous experiences, we never think to ourselves, the very view that I have of the world separates me from it. Because I see the world as separate from myself. Some place where things are that I want, some place things are that I don't want. Failing to see that in that particular view, not only do we not know anything about what the relationship is between ourselves and the real world, we don't have a clue that what we see in this world, all of its hatred, all of its selfishness, its cruelty, and yes, all of its beauty as well. But far, far separate from most of that suffering are those moments where something other than that takes place. We don't realize this world is a material reflection of the level of consciousness responsible for what's there. Now, we're not responsible for the trees and nature and all of the things that are beautiful and harmonious, But we are responsible for what takes place in that nature as a result of our nature and how we relate to one another. So that our life and what we experience with everyone else is 100% a manifestation of an unconscious nature that first creates the world that it wants in its own image, which is critical to understand. And as it creates it in its own image, then it resists and hates anything that threatens that image, so that anyone in any moment in life that doesn't exactly confirm myself as I've imagined is something I'm in conflict with. But I think the conflict is a creation of the world outside of me, not of the consciousness that imagined being confirmed as it imagined itself. Do you understand that? So we're literally, and I'm not going to get into this business, we're literally born into a fallen level of being. Literally fallen into a level of being that as part of its continuous descent, and it is a continuous descent, this world has never gotten better. All that it does is find better ways to hide the corruption in it. Because you and I have become more and more convinced that what is corrupt in us is necessary. It is the means to a divine end. So that we are made subject to a nature without knowing it, that as we grow into that nature, meaning identifying with this idea of the world is other than we are filled with fear all the time. People go say, I want an unconditional, I'm going to surrender, I want an unconditional life. Do you know how you come to the idea of an unconditional life? Anybody want to venture a guess? Through conditioned ideas. And the unconscious nature that's so dependent upon keeping those ideas in place so that I can finally be confirmed as I've imagined myself. So that everything's a threat to this nature, which is why it's always so tense. And which is why, moving towards the point, little by little it becomes pretty evident that my life, the reason it is the way it is, because part of the way I see the world, and part of the world, this consciousness that gave birth to the way I see everything about it. Do you remember when you were growing up? What was the big question you were asked when you, what will you be? Yes or no? What will you become? I don't know. I'm a little kid. God, now I got a problem. No, I really do. I didn't know I was supposed to become something. I was enjoying looking at my hand. What will I become? What are my choices? And then what are the choices that a child is offered in this fallen world? Whatever his parents didn't quite succeed at doing, but you'll do better than I did. I'll never forget, it's ingrained in my mind. I was 16 years old. I was already well on the way on this in interior life. My father was worried. He came and he took me to dinner. Son, what's wrong with you? Another question. I don't know. He said, this was back, this is in the 50s? This is in the 60s, early 60s, before most of you were born. He said, son, you should already be making $50,000 a year and driving a Cadillac. And I looked at him and I said, but that's not what I want. I won't tell you what I wanted back in the day. It was the best I understood it. What I actually said was, I don't want that. What do you want? And I said, I want to be like a God. That was what I said. I didn't know that what I really meant was that I wanted to know God. All I had was the longing of something, no relationship directly with anything divine. That's the best a child's mind can do. So the whole thing, our path, is determined by what? What I've imagined I need to become in order to be free of the fear that this consciousness that begins by separating us then tells us here's how to escape the fear I've created. Become something, and then you will live in constant fear that you can't keep in place what you've become. This is the world in which we live. But we do not know we live in that world. we suffer from it instead of being participants in a completely different order of consciousness that does not have that fear and hatred and unconscious suffering in it. My mom and dad never said to me, son, no, not will you be. Who will you be, son? Who do you want to be? Now, for us, who do you want to be is inseparable from what I imagine becoming. But the real question, who will I be, has nothing to do with time at all. Something our parents could never understand. Who will I be is determined moment by moment by moment by a relationship that we have no awareness of, that we're going to talk about in great depth. So that every split second of one's life, who I will be is determined by the grace of God that is revealing to me who I am when I came into this moment, so that it might be sacrificed, so that something else could take place from this nature that is moving through time and has no awareness of itself at all, but that is allowed by the light of God, the light of Christ, to see what it is, and in the recognition of what it has become, recognize it cannot go any further as it is, and as it is the source of suffering, not the solution to it. You following me? Now, one more transition. We've proven, you and I before, I hope that if you didn't catch it, you will, that there exists what I call, it's one of my favorite ideas, an infinite capacity for perfect similarity. Oh, I love that. An infinite capacity for perfect similarity. Now, looking at what we just discussed, we have an infinite capacity for perfect conflict, don't we? Because the conflict just generates itself every time we come up with an excuse for why we are suffering as we are. But we also know, on the other side, the infinite capacity for perfect similarity is this remarkable moment in which a person's life is suddenly lifted out from that nature, and like the poets or the artists, those who in some way or another are transported. And here's another thing. I intend to go into this in great depth later. Suddenly, here's it might be you in these moments, as fleeting as they are. For whatever reason, what we call the light goes on. Do you know what it means when the light goes on? It means all the centers in a human being are momentarily connected. So that there's a completely new energy that's circulating through the entire instrument. And with that new energy, new perception. With new perception, new relationship. And that new relationship, what is the hallmark of it, is there's no separation. Look at this beauty. I just read this line. I heard a beautiful quote from Fenelon. Oh, well, there's instantaneous resonance. There's no me, there's no it, there's just the recognition that this is true, and that somehow or other, listen, there was never any distance between myself and that truth. Because the moment of that epiphany is the fact that there is an infinite capacity for perfect similarity with that which is pure and beautiful, as there is for that which is punishing and corrupt. You know the story of the little girl and the medicine man? I have two wolves. Which wolf is going to win? The one you feed, he said. So there's an altogether different magnitude of a relationship that can be realized, in which, again to the point, you read something, you hear something, maybe you have a moment like that listening to the speaker. Wow. Everything. The heart fills. The poets, the statue of Michelangelo, these men and women bring from that world that exists right now within us, bring out of that light something that is the shape and form that most closely represents what they perceived. And if it's a true objective presentation, you look at it and you feel something of what that man or woman brought down from the heavens into this world. It could be anything, music, poetry. And all of the teachings, all of the ideas are connected to this idea that there is a sacred divine dimension, and that there's no moment in which you are apart from it other than when you have been parted from it because of a predilection on this unconscious nature to do what? To dwell. Where? Nice deep breath. I'm going to read something to you. You'll understand the reason for this transition. I'm going to interpret fragmentarily some scripture. This is out of Matthew and it's in Luke. Now when Jesus saw the great multitudes about him, he gave commandment to his disciples to depart to the other side. Even this one idea. You know, everybody has this idea about Jesus being, this loving, perfectly kind. And in fact, he was, but the kindness and love that he incarnated had nothing to do with what the world called love and kindness. Nothing. And it's always in the scripture. We just blow by it. Well, if he sees the multitudes and they're there to there, well, why does he say, let's get over to the other side? Which, by the way, is let us separate from. And the word multitude meant rabble. The mob. The looky-loos. The people who say they love truth and God as they understand it, or say they want to know something of this new teaching that's come into the world. But they're not interested. They want the fishes and the loaves. They want what they recognize as food. So he says, let's depart to the other side. And one of the multitude, one of the rabble, a scribe, he comes up and says, Master, I'll follow you wherever thouest goeth. You had to have good teeth in those days or you couldn't talk. And Christ said to him, this is what I love. He says, the foxes have holes and the birds in the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to rest his head. Now, the scribe goes, Christ is saying, as part of this seemingly loving crowd, the minute that you have to go through what it is that you would go through if you embraced the light of my life, not me, you would immediately depart. And then another disciple comes and says to him, Lord, suffer me first to go bury my father. Now, people think, oh, well, of course. And Christ said unto him, follow me and let the dead bury the dead. There doesn't seem to be much compassion in that, does it? You hate that. Because that's all you have. Is this idea of what it means to love, of what it means to be in relationship with what is good and true. He said, let the dead bury the dead. But before it, he said, follow me, which did not mean physically follow me. Because if it was just physically follow me, then the scribe could have done it, wouldn't have been a problem. He was saying, be in this moment as I am to this moment, and you and I will be together in this moment, and then you'll understand what it means to let the dead bury the dead. And I'm going to explain in depth to you as I finish this scripture. And when he had entered the ship, by the way, he went and buried his father, which I'll tell you about. And when he entered the ship, now we go from let the dead bury the dead to getting on a ship. And when he entered the ship, his disciples followed him, and behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with waves, but he was asleep. And his disciples came to him and awoke him and said, Lord, save us, we perish. Save us, we perish. And he said to them, why are you so afraid, O ye of little faith? Then he arose, rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. What does being of little faith have to do with the sea that threatens to sink the ship that they got on to separate from the rabble? This is all one story. It's not separate. It's a single teaching broken down into fragments as best it could be reproduced. And by the way, corrupted even in the best version of the Bibles. What does it mean? Who are the dead? Who are the dead that Christ says they should be left, that the dead should bury the dead? Who are the dead that are being buried, and who are the dead that are burying them? Whew. Do you understand the question? Because it doesn't seem very sympathetic on the part of Christ to say, let the dead bury the dead, does it? So I'm going to tell you who are the dead that are told to go bury the dead. They are those who suffer over and for the sake of keeping dead images, along with the self that's identified with them, alive. That's who the dead are. Those who suffer over and for the sake of keeping dead images, along with the sense of self identified with them. They are inseparable. So that my sense of self, whatever it is, cannot be considered apart from whatever it is that I have brought with me from the past. And what is in the past is dead. But it is brought back to life every time a person remembers that image and experiences themselves again, and then as a rule will compare and judge themselves according to whatever it is that the mind has brought up. Man said, let me bury my father and I'll join you. Who are the dead? Let the dead bury the dead. Another answer, the dead are anyone who has not the light, let alone the love in them, to consciously suffering what that light, that love in them reveals about their level of being. That's who bury the dead, are those who do not want to see that they themselves are dead. If my sense of self is a derivative of everything that I think about, what do I think about other than what's in the past? When you say, no, I'm thinking about what will happen. No, you're not thinking about what will happen. What you're afraid might happen according to what you still believe should happen is there thinking for you. That involuntary will. Let the dead bury the dead. But what about yesterday? Do you remember what he did, what she said? Do you remember how that happened? You know how the world turned? Remember that war? Let the dead bury the dead. Every thought that you have about the past produces a corresponding sense of self, and the sense of self connected to that sensation is as dead as the time it is thinking about. Are you able to ingest this? That's all I have. And it's not only all I have, but it is what determines my relationship to everything in the present moment. Because what is my resistance to the present moment, if not something that is dead, finding a sense of life by resisting what can't be said to be otherwise? Please. This is why the rabble scatters. I don't want to know about my nature. I say I do. But when the moment comes and it's possible that by the light of Christ, I don't think this is scriptural. This thought came to me when I was thinking about this. If Christ was going to speak, I have come to awaken and to stir in your heart and mind that which was within you before you took this body, and that which is waiting to come back to life. And that's what I have come to do, is bring you back to life. I don't think he ever said that, but that's the gist of it. And there's nothing religious about that at all. It means that in the beginning was sown into this nature a light that has nothing to do with the manifestation of form the world gives to it, but that is constantly there if an individual is willing to stay in it, so that by that light they can see everything that isn't light. They can see the light that calls itself light that is darkness, which is what justification for your suffering is light that calls it, is darkness that calls itself light. Wouldn't that be a fact? If I sit and call something that is obviously against me and against you, and I say it's necessary, is that part of the good or part of what is not good? And if I could see it wasn't good, would I say it and act it out? Would I? I was dead and now I am alive. And I am dying to death as I come alive. But it isn't I who live. It is that which has revealed to me within myself that which is death that called itself life. And there's a great price, which I'm going to explain to you now. I'm going to revisit a story from, I think it was the Relationship Magic book. Another flop. And I need to do it somewhat quickly. So here is a husband and a wife. And like all husbands and wives, they have their time where they like being with each other, and then they have their time where they wish they weren't looking at the person that's responsible for everything that irritates them so much. It's built into this nature. You see, it's like another whole talk. You don't know that presently you are an inconstant being, but the inconstancy isn't because of the nature of your possible interior life, but rather the inconstancy is because conditions trigger consciousness. The consciousness that's triggered by passing conditions changes with the conditions, so that each I becomes the expression and the manifestation of the condition that brings it into this world, and that it speaks from and for, each one involuntary, because they're all connected to the past. They are the past. Every I that comes up that is triggered by the past is an opportunity to die to the past as it's revealed, as opposed to participate in the continuation of that I that is the past. Understand that? So there he is, and he's put on a lot of weight, and his wife, she says, I want you to be healthy, but she also has this picture in her mind. You can't escape it. You grew up thinking what healthy, handsome people look like, and you're probably the only one that looks that way. Meaning you're the only one who matches the image of how perfect people should be. So he's in the kitchen, and he sees the cookie jar. And he made a promise, I'm not going to have cookies. But even as he's thinking to himself, I'm not going to have cookies, he's thinking she's in the living room. And she's probably not going to know that I'm going to get a cookie. And it's a cookie that Dana and Sue made, which is really hard to say no to. Is this a personal story? So he starts walking towards over the cookie jar, and he actually gets his hands on the lid of the cookie jar when she walks in. Now, she doesn't know that prior to her walking in, he was just going to put the lid down. He'd made up his mind. He was going to stay good to his word. And she goes, what are you doing? Not, hi, honey. What are you doing? Now, because of her immediate negativity, his involuntary nature is to respond to her resistance with what? Defensiveness. And he starts saying, no, you don't understand. I think I understand plenty. No, you don't. Because she can't see into his mind, and all he can see is his irritation at the way she's treating him. And if you know the story, which is your story, what happens once the argument gets going? 4 hours later, if that, maybe 40 years later, it's still going on. but not in this story. And as it reaches this pitch, all of a sudden she sees him take on a completely different demeanor. From red-faced and irritated, leaning forward, protective, defensive. You're just like I am. I've seen you do stuff. What makes you more irritated than somebody that's saying you do stuff like that too? He sits down in the kitchen chair. Immediately she's more irritated. What are you doing? And he said, you know what? And this is the line from the book, and this is what the rest of the talk is to explain. He said, this one's on me. This one's on me. Now in the book, I explain that means I'm going to pay for this experience. I'm not going to make you pay for this experience. I'm going to pay for it. But when he says, this one's on me, she goes, what do you mean this one's on you? This isn't on you. This is about us. And I don't know if you've seen this. I have 1,000 times. If you won't argue with somebody, it proves to them you don't care about them. How insane is that? I have a position, you have a position, and by God, we're going to hammer at each other until we reach a compromise. And the only problem with the compromise that you reach is that it's born out of conflict, which means it's the seed of the next conflict with another human being. Because not one of the human beings in that moment is changed one iota. I hear it all the time, say, well, I'm going to accept this moment. Great. For 10 seconds, you've got this image of accepting a problem. But 10 minutes later, someone else does something, and there's no you that accepted that. Now there's the you that rejects anyone and anything challenging you. Yes or no, out loud. She says, what do you mean? This one's on you. And he says, I'll no longer be a part of this unending conflict, nor the suffering that creates it. I'll no longer be a part of this unending conflict, nor the suffering that creates it. She can't understand what he's saying. What are you talking about? What do you mean you won't be part of this conflict? You mean you don't want anything to do with me anymore? No, I didn't say that at all, he said, in a calmer voice than I just said it. No, just the opposite of that. She said, I'm not following you. How so? And he said, I've seen things. Well, so have I. She's not quite on the right side yet. You've seen nothing I haven't seen. I've seen it all. Don't you think you've seen it all? Yes or no? Isn't it amazing that when you're negative, in the smallest tiny little peephole that you're looking out at, full of pain, you think you see the whole story? She says, what do you mean? He said, I've seen that I can't change you. And that blaming you just creates conflict. I've seen I can't change you. And then, well, what does that mean? You mean you're not going to try? Do you think there's anyone there? One minute I hate that you're trying to change me. The next moment you say you're not going to try to change me anymore. What's wrong with you? Yes or no? How many things do you always fighting to change? Sweet Jesus. Because this is a relationship between two people. This is you and your children, you and the people around you, you and the world that you are responsible for manifesting the way it is. Every time that you resist a moment, inherent in the resistance is the idea that it shouldn't be that way, but I know how to change it, and by God I will tomorrow. Yes or no, out loud. So they get through that, and then he says, I've also seen some other things. Now, is she going, tell me what you've seen? Maybe she is. What else? He said, I've seen that you can't change me. Believe me, sweetheart, I wish to God you could change me. I wish that you walking in and getting angry at me for being the kind of person I am and blaming me for whatever the pain is, I wish to God that could change me. But we've been together for 400,000 years. And not once has you resisting something in me that you don't like served to do anything except strengthen in me the insistence that that part is all right and one day it'll be different. Yes or no? Do you not automatically resist when someone tries to change you? Yes or no? He says, well, if you've seen that I can't change you and that you can't change yourself, what's left? He said, what's left is a realization that I could have never dreamed, and certainly one that I don't want. But now, as strange as it sounds, he said, by the grace of God, I realize it can't be ignored anymore. Please, she said. He said, I've seen I can't change my nature that always defaults into blame or regret, neither of which has done one thing to change you or me. I can't change my nature that always defaults into blame or regret, neither of which has ever done anything to change me or you. Has one thing you have ever blamed another human being for being or doing changed you or that human being in any meaningful way? Meaning, when all comes push and shove, are you not always reverting back to what? To what? What was the story from the Bible? The dead. The dead. That which knows itself from what it was and is constantly trying to prove itself and living in fear that it won't be confirmed as it imagines. Why do you get irritated with people other than the fact that in that moment they're not being what you need them to be to confirm you as you imagine yourself? I'm a very loving person. I would never do that. How many of you ever said I would never do that? And you might never do the thing that they did, but you do exactly the same thing in other places. You just don't see it. Why? Because it's justified. So she looks at him, she says, well, where does that leave us? Because if you were really involved in this, let's say you were the one listening, not the one who was explaining this. If I can't change you and you can't change me, and you've seen that there's something going on in you that's always going to bring up something that needs to be changed in me or yourself, where does that leave us? And he said, I can't speak for you. He said, but what has to happen now is inescapable. And if it were, believe me, if it were possible to avoid it, I would. What did Christ say up there on the hill after his disciples fell asleep? Not my will, but thy will be done. I don't want this. Sweating blood, they said. I don't want this. One day you'll understand that the Christ in that moment lives inside of you, and it is always there, but it's not doing what it was created to do because it still sleeps. This talk is about how it's awakened. What are you getting at? She said. So he said, well, starting this evening, here and now, and then I wrote the words, without further delay. What that means is that what I understand is true is not something I'm going to do later, and it's not something I'm going to judge myself for, but rather, without delay, I'm going to start working to remember and to live the only prayers that can possibly help change me and you if you see the wisdom in that action. Right now, that's what I'm going to do. Prayers, he said, living prayers. Prayers that as I embrace and remember them, the intention is to be the instrument of the understanding that has helped me remember them. And here are the three prayers, the three living prayers. Bring up the first one, please. Let me be present to the pain of my own nature before I subject you to it. Let me be present to the pain of my own nature before I subject you to it. You are never present to the pain that you subject others to because you have become the subject of something that is blaming those around you for the pain that you're in. Everyone, everything is responsible for your anger and your grief and your frustration. His new prayer is saying, before I speak these words, before my face takes on the expression, before the expletive comes out of my mouth that maybe I don't even voice, but that ripples through me, before any of that happens, where I'm getting ready to blame you, let me be present to the pain that wants to blame you. Bring up the second prayer, please. These are 3 living prayers. Let me suffer myself long enough to see what I would never be able to see otherwise. Let me suffer myself long enough to see what I would never be able to see otherwise. Do you know why you never see this dead nature, this unconscious conditioned self that creates the conflict that it blames and punishes others for? Do you know why you never see it's in you? Because it's always pointing its finger at the source of a pain as separate from itself. So that there's never a moment in which a person actually sees for himself that the last thing that I want to do is suffer myself. I want you to suffer for what I call the pain in myself. Some of you have had healthy shocks, true first shocks, where even though it might be postpartum, the pain that you would exact on another human being, you could see that what spoke from you in that moment was involuntary. And that the evil that came out of your mouth and the wishes that you had that that person would drop dead or leave you alone or finally see the wisdom of your intelligence, all of that you can see is corrupted, and it's corrupted by something that wants to keep the dead alive, that won't bury the dead. So the dead keeps the dead alive by living through them and keeping them in place as something particular to the necessity of their continuation. Isn't that so? Where would I go? If when I'm negative, if I wasn't complaining, if I wasn't conniving, if I wasn't busy correcting paths of other people, if I wasn't busy judging myself, where would all of that moment go if the mind didn't revisit and compare itself to who it imagines itself to be? What would I be left with in that moment? I'd be left with being what I am. And what I am is not the resistance to what I see. What I am is the light that shows me what I have never seen before. What I am is in a relationship with the living light that shows men and women the content of their nature. That's there every moment of our life, but that we're never there in it because we would rather see ourselves through the light of a consciousness that's nearly perfect. Do you see it with me? And the last of these 3 prayers. Let me bear myself in silence so that I'm the only one who knows I'm suffering. Let me bear myself in silence so I'm the only one who knows I'm suffering. I'm not even going to talk to myself about my suffering. I'll find no consolation in any conditioned thought or feeling that comes up from the dead to help me so-called keep that sense of self alive as someone who one day won't have to suffer the indignity of being around other people who are the way that other people are. Christ said, when you pray, go into this closet and don't let others see you doing it. What do you think he's talking about? Stop trying to be seen by other human beings who you want to see you so they will confirm you as you've imagined yourself to be in that moment. How many of you are long-suffering? Come on, get them up. You know what it means. Hell yes, I'm long-suffering. And if I don't have anything immediate to suffer over, I'll just go back into the hall of the dead. I'll bring up something out of a tomb, and I'll torment myself over that. And that's what I'll suffer over. Every time you suffer over what you think may happen 10 seconds from now, it is the dead bringing the dead back to life so that that sense of self can go on and make a plan to deal with what it can't plan to begin with. Some of you won't even look at me while I'm talking. I wonder why. You don't know the miracle that lives inside of you, and you can't as you are because you're still praying that people will change. You're still praying that you can change. You're still praying for a time to come where you won't be old and decrepit, where somehow or other people will finally do exactly what you want them to do when you want them to do it. You're praying for enough money or enough health to get you through to the next dream that will collapse even as you realize it. That's all you pray for. You pray for yourself. And if Christ's life, if the true life, the true light of life is about anything, it's about understanding that what I have to pray for is that I can be in relationship with something that shows me I am as I am, so that in that revelation I can stop agreeing to be that self. I can die to myself. You won't die to yourself as long as you have a single hope in yourself. You won't die to yourself as long as you have a single wish that someone else be other than they are. You won't die to yourself as long as you have a tomorrow that's brighter than the moment you're in. You can't, because everything about your life is predicated on the dead imagining a life to come that you'll be filled with and finally free. Bring up the last key lesson, if you would, please. And before we read it, she says, because she's worked at this, don't look at the key, just listen. She says, but what if, she says to him, what if I can feel it? Can you feel those prayers? Yes or no? She says, I can feel it. And I even know it's true. She said, but not just you. What if I can't remember these prayers before I become involuntarily negative? Then what? Because she said, like you, how many of you know that long before you can remember these prayers presently as you are, that something else is coming in and it's got your mouth, got your eyes, got your ears, got your hands? Yes or no? What if before you, what happens? He said, well, then I have a last prayer. It's not on the board. He said, my prayer is that I will suffer as consciously as I can. Whatever stands revealed as true about my present nature, and I will use that illumination as best I can to ensure my intention is strengthened next time. You see, then you can't hate. You can't hate yourself. You can't involuntarily make a victim of yourself or those that you blame for victimizing you. Why? Because as Christ said, turn around, metanoia, repent. Everything now is turned in the right direction. The light is where the light is supposed to be, revealing the moment and the nature that is part of it and everything that's meant to be reborn. There's no rebirth for a human being who won't bury the dead. Period. And the dead isn't just the physical dead. The dead is the part of you that wants to keep itself alive by finding things to judge and blame for the way it feels. Can you see that or not? The last key lesson and a summary. Read along with me. Aren't you excited? You know, just before I read it, you have a wrong idea. A lot of wrong ideas, and we all do. We can't help it. This is what you need to see. See, the idea comes to me. I don't call up the idea. I'm sitting here, I'm kind of dull. I feel like I'm dead. I feel like my heart's dry. My mind has no spirit in it. And the idea comes to me. See? No, let's just go back to sleep. Let's go have some more pizza. Let's do anything because there's no chance. You got nothing. And you start singing that song, I'm a loser, because I got nothing moving in me. No, you have a lot moving in you, but what's moving in you is the dead that has judged the moment you're in, instead of you realizing there's no moment in which, if I'm awake presently and give myself to what it is that I will, what I wish, as opposed to the wish that is being cast over me, then in that moment I'm reconnected. And the split second that you're reconnected to any higher aspiration, have you noticed you have no higher aspirations when you feel dead? And how the dead always justifies itself and finds a way to make sure that you don't bother it? No person, no situation ever puts a strained, angry feeling in us any more than eating chocolate has the power to make us sweet. What disturbs us isn't caused by what we see, but rather by what it stirs in us as we see it. Just as a mirror isn't to be blamed for ejecting something that we don't want to face, life itself is never the cause of what we don't want to see, let alone be. Rather, it is the revealer of it. It is the moment in which, by the grace of God, a light appears in which an individual recognizes the condition I'm experiencing is the consciousness that's present in that moment. And if there's something involuntary and dark in that consciousness, then thank God for that light, because now I know what I can no longer do and be, and my prayer will begin to change at last. And the prayer will be, let me suffer myself as I am, not you for what I blame you for bringing up in me. You start making any one of those three prayers, they're actually a single prayer. And the last thing she says to him, oh my God. She said, I've messed around with this stuff. She said, and all I found out was that I was getting worse. Anybody have that feeling yet? You know, Guy, I had really great hopes when I first started listening to you, because Christ was going to come into my life and everything was be great. And now everything's dark. No, the Christ has come into your life, and you're starting to see that what you called your life was never your life to begin with. And that's how you lose it, by seeing the fact of that. You're just seeing by the light of God the truth of yourself, but not the judgment that you have of yourself, because you're a master at that. Judge not that ye be not judged. Let the dead not judge the living, because the dead can't judge. What are the dead going to find? All that I said to you is already a part of you, just as is the Christ, the light of Christ. You've just forgotten it. You have to want to remember it. But you can't have to want to remember it when things go south. You need to want to remember it every moment of your life, so that when you get ready to go talk to somebody or get on a phone or pick up an email or whatever, right in that moment, when you know, you should know, you're going to be revisited by the dead. What do you think your regrets are? The regrets are the dead come back to be brought to life by you resisting an experience that only exists because you've revisited it. No, I know this is coming up in me. And here's the beauty of it. And the more you know that this is going to be present in you, the more shocking it is when you can't do anything except meet it involuntarily with the same old nature. And that shock is the healthy shock of seeing yourself as you are, and how deeply entrenched is this unconscious nature, this legion. Because in the revelation and in the growing revelation of it, there comes a realization that I now understand wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, I have to have these three living prayers with me, so that I'm no longer the instrument of that which has no prayer of ever becoming different in this life, that will never know what rebirth is. You can, if you wish. Let's take a break.
Welcome back, everyone. We have just a moment here before we begin our online discussion, as I talked about in the introduction to class, where we'll have a chance to talk with Guy and ask questions about the material he just presented. But before we do, just one reminder of an upcoming event that is very special to us, the students here at Life of Learning, and to many I know, and that is that just about 5 weeks from now, June 20th to the 22nd, we'll be hosting our annual Talks in the Pines, and that has been an event here at the Foundation for, I think, 25 years, and it's a great opportunity to come visit us live. Guy will be giving 3 very special talks during that kind of extended weekend. The title of it is, of the talks, and the theme of that event is One Love, One Life, One Journey. And I'm very much looking forward to those talks. And this is also a very special event because this will be the last time that there will be a live Talks in the Pines here in Southern Oregon at the Foundation. So if you can join us in person, we heartily encourage you to do so. The numbers I've been hearing about advanced registration for that event, we're going to have one of the largest groups we've had recently, and that is exciting to know that there will be many people joining us. And if you can't join us live, it will be live streamed as well across all of our platforms. And so again, we do hope you'll join us for Talks in the Pines, June 20th through the 22nd. And if you want any more information about how to register or how to come, if you wish to come here live, you can go to our website at guyfinley.org/one, and that'll tell you all you need to know about that. So very much looking forward to that. Before we begin our discussion, Guy, do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Nope.
Nope. All right, then those of you online and in the room, this is now our opportunity to participate. If you're online, those of you on Facebook and YouTube, you can send in written questions, and those will be relayed to me to relay to Guy. Those of you on GoToWebinar, you can just click the hand icon and you can come up. You can then be unmuted by me, and those of you in the room, as I see Debbie over here, is just kind of sneaking up.
Get out of the way, John, for God's sake.
You can come up at any time. So we will start with Debbie.
He needs a hook, doesn't he?
Hi, my name's Debbie, and in this talk today, he was mentioning something about the conversation between the man and the woman at the end, where the woman, well, both of them said, you know, things seem to get worse. It will seem as though the darkness is greater, when in fact, as we are, you know, told, it's the light that's getting greater. It's showing us more about this nature in us. And I think on Wednesday, he also mentioned something about when you do this work, it starts to become one class. You're going through one class all the time because you realize what this nature's like, and there is nothing more you want to do than find out more and more about it. And the only way you can do that is to be in something that's timeless as much as possible. And you're in a relationship with something timeless that will show you that nature. And so that's a really lovely thing. And so just, you know, persist with this, folks. Anyway.
Pool table, don't you understand? You can't get him off, you can't get him on.
I'm totally bamboozled here. Again, our queue is wide open for those of you on GoToWebinar. If you'd like to raise your hand, please do so. I do have a written question that has come in from Isabella. And she says, I have been suffering myself for some time now. I watch and see the movement of this consciousness as it tries to judge others and also mostly judges myself. But then I have been in a state of feeling like I've lost my joy. Although I see beauty in nature and in the animals and plants that breathe life around me, yet the challenge seems to be how not to stay in a depressive state. How do I navigate this dying to self while still living so I'm not a downer all the time? Is this just the trek through the valley of the shadow of death?
So Isabella and everybody, if you have any gray matter left with which to listen. So here's Christ. Here's the multitudes, the rabble, the pretend spiritual people, the ones who've come just to have a sensation, mostly of judging him, comparing his teachings to what they know to be true. And no more does he say, let us go to the other, let us depart and go to the other side. Let us separate ourselves from this level of consciousness. Then the next thing you know, the story's in a boat. And his disciples are in the boat with him. And a great storm comes up. Can you separate the fact that the storm came up from separating from the rabble? Or is the storm the fact that there's something inside of us that when we try to separate from what we know is not useful, does it not get itself into a storm? And then, curious, he wakes up and he says to them, "O ye of little faith." Why is he rebuking them for having little faith? Why is he doing that? Can your mind understand the relationship between let the dead bury the dead and O ye of little faith? If I bury the dead aren't going to die quietly. This nature is not going to go, oh, that's good. You're starting to see things about me. Yeah, every once in a while you see a bone come out of my cheek. You realize you're a living skeleton rattling around in what you call real life. And suddenly you see this. Is it going to go, oh, this is great. Let's do a little more so you can see even more about what you've taken yourself to be? Or will it create a storm? And what kind of storm does it create? Isabella just talked about one of the forms. I can't put in you what God has put in you. That's a fool's errand. It's the epitome of arrogance to believe that any human being can put into another human being something that whatever they're trying to put into the other human being ain't it, not real. But I can put to you certain ideas. And one of them is, and you'll just have to realize what it means. I weather the storm of the challenge to my faith. Because when my faith isn't present and all of this pain and despair and emptiness is, I don't know where else to turn to other than to the dead to lift me out of that storm. When the dead is the storm. I must understand that weathering this storm, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, not that I walk through death itself, I walk through everything that the dead is telling me is going to happen to me if I don't succumb and yield to what it says I have to do. Just give up, go away, drop this, it's impossible. You're empty, you're dry, you're dead, you're a hypocrite. There was never a greater hypocrite that walked the planet than you. You say this and then you do that. And it's merciless, isn't it? Do you think that's God that's merciless to you, judging you? What's judging you is what is dead, and it is judging the dead for the sense of life that comes out of it. And we fall for it every single time. Do you see this? Isabella, I hope that helps.
And our queue is open, and again, I invite students in the room, if you wish to come up at any time, please.
Hold on, John. It doesn't really hit us. Let's see, so the speaker said this, that, and the other, and I want to correct Debbie said something. We're told this. Don't you ever say that you're told something. Cowards say, I'm told something. I see it or I don't. I see it or I don't. Not I was told this. The Bible says I was told this. That's the very description of fear, because it's reliance on an idea that didn't originate within you, but that you took from something in which to create a castle for yourself. No. Quite the opposite is true. I must, for myself, see beyond the shadow of a doubt that these moments where I'm empty, I'm dry, I'm angry, I'm lonely, I'm desperate, why has it never occurred to me? He said, I have to weather the storm. Weather what storm? What is it that I have to weather? I'm asking you. Have I lost you? You're out to space now. Too bad. Anybody? What is it that I have to weather? Myself. Well, is there how can I be a storm unto myself? No, let me ask these questions of myself. What do you mean? So what I really can't stand in this moment is the experience of being myself. Well, where am I going to find another experience? I'm going to have a strategy of surrender. I'm going to have a strategy of being a better Jew or a better Christian or a better Muslim. That's my strategy. I'm going to have a strategy of never having anything to do with whatever brought up all this darkness in me, including you, Mr. Finley. I'm done with you. Goodbye. No. Let me gird myself in old Scripture. Let me gird myself so I understand that part of the development of the soul requires the revelation of the quality of the soul, so that in the light that reveals it as being what it is, it can begin to subject itself, to die to itself for the sake of being born into something completely new that it cannot know without going through it.
My name is Heidi, and I was re-listening to the Easter talk that Guy gave a couple weeks ago. And I was so glad he took a completely new approach to it. Just like he's talking about the verse, let the dead bury the dead. What a nice new approach to see that's images inside of myself, to clarify that. But the impression that I had was, when there's such a fuss made over Christ, Jesus Christ. People say the word and they're gone. But nobody really follows what happens when he dies and when he comes back. Everyone just gets dressed up and looks good for Easter and goes to brunch, and then it's done, and then we're on to the next holiday. Nobody cared that he died. His own people that knew him didn't even believe he came back. He did it for nothing for them, and yet for everything. It's so interesting to me how blind this consciousness is. It can reflect and praise something and feel so animated by praising, but then the reality, very much to the heart of the talk, it can't stand seeing anything wrong with itself. It won't do it. And though something says through me, yes, I'll agree to suffer. I'll agree to suffer a new pain. When a pain comes, like it did for me last Saturday, all day I was offered to suffer. Will you suffer this just a little bit? Here's something you haven't faced. And I can't tell you how many times my mind just deflected it and said, no, I don't want to suffer today. I want pleasure today. I want something. There's an I that just wants to be pleased. And that's where I'm at. That's where I'm really grateful to be here now. There's an I that I haven't seen that only wants pleasure. And there are so many buffers in the way. There are so many ways that this nature gives itself pleasure that it almost can't perceive any pain because it just steps off to the next one. And so it's more evident that there's a lot of work to do to stay in the work, and may it be so that we stay.
Something that never occurs to you, and it takes, I don't know, why don't I change? Can it be that instead of what in some religions would call the true comforter, I keep the company of the consoler? The images of what the Bible tells me is true, what I'm told by Scripture, east and west, awaits the sincere aspirant. Or have I reached the point where I want my prayers not to be a result of thinking about myself in relationship to something I heard may or may not be true? When it comes time for you to die, and everyone in this room will die, you do not escape this planet. And when you die, you are either going to be in the presence of that which is not afraid of death because it has already met it, or you're going to be terrified of the death that's coming for you. And in that moment, your mind won't be able to genuflect on what you've been told waits for you and all this, that, and the other, that crud that human beings coat themselves with that promises them somehow if they just can console themselves, they'll get through this difficult path. No, no consolation. No consolation. Just the fact of what is in this moment. The fact of what I'm given to see about the nature that doesn't want to see itself. Let me be present to the pain of my own nature before I subject you to it. Do I need anything before me to do that? Do I need to invent some God? Do I need to invent a God? Or is my God an invention of a nature that sees to it I'm consoled in these moments when the conflict is there? You better get rid of those gods. I'm not saying there isn't a God. I'm not saying there isn't an actual Christ. I'm saying that your God, your Christ, is that which is keeping you from understanding what it means to be in a divine relationship that is forever being reborn and you along with it. The ruthlessness that's required of an aspirant who would know something of the life of Christ, of God, the ruthlessness isn't something that you can manufacture. The ruthlessness comes from seeing how ruthless a part of yourself has been in lying to you and giving you a very familiar, consoling sense of self. You need to get rid of every consoling sense of self that you've got, but you can't do it on your own. It's involuntary. But you can begin to see how involuntary it is, how these feelings come up dressed in words that are very comfortable, but then in the end, the comfort disappears the minute a condition challenges the sense of self derived from it.
I think we have this comment guy that came in from YouTube that I think very much relates to perhaps what you just told us. This is a comment. A YouTube viewer wrote in, grief seems to be a fight, especially perpetual grief.
It is. It's not that there's not grief. Christ didn't say, don't grieve for your father. These are things in levels and scale. The point is that this man wanted to go bury his father before he did the interior work. And Christ was saying, you go ahead, but you will not, he went on later, you put down the plow. You can't do it. But you can do it if you want. And you will. But I'll be gone. That's the nature of it. I loved my father. I loved my mother. I loved my brother. Just everybody's popping off. But most of what you call grief is the dead burying the dead. Me remembering and longing for, by the way, the people that most of the time I had something deleterious to speak about them. And now they're gone, but now I love them. Yes, you probably do love them. Family, blood is blood. But human beings glorify grief because in the glorification of the image of someone who's no longer here, I am here. And is any image alive? Where does an image get its life from? Where do images get their life from? It's not too difficult. From identification. So does my identification with an image that isn't alive bring it alive? Does it bring me alive? It seems to, because I've never been more alive than when I'm grieving. One last thing about this. And this is what no church will ever say it, no temple will ever say it, unless it's a true church, a true temple. Christ didn't come to save everybody. If he come to save everybody, why is he talking about these seeds go there and the crows eat them? Or the weeds get this and these get burned and the weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth? What the hell is he talking about? He's saying there's a parable, there's a sower, and it throws seed. The seed is to bring up, to stir in the human heart the remembrance of the fact that I came from something that isn't filled with this anger and hatred, that isn't always judging and blaming. But that's what I am now. I live an involuntary life. The will of heaven be done on the will of earth. And suddenly a person starts to realize, how am I ever going to do the will of heaven when all that I am, by and large, is the will of hell, not even the will of earth? The will of anything that upsets me is that it will go away. I will that I will disappear. I will that I will change everything. I don't care what it does to somebody, but I will it. One day you won't have that will because you'll understand you cannot will something for another human being that you don't experience in that moment, that will. That's how it changes.
Hello, my name is Patricia. When Rebecca asked that question, when I'm in a hard time, during hard times...
Isabella, you mean?
Isabella,
yeah.
Sorry. I always think of Buddha, who had to sit there under the Bodhi tree with the slings and arrows. And those slings and arrows are from him, from his past, just like we're talking about. But I always notice at the other end of a hard period, and they come in various ways, there's space. There's a little space left. And I'm seeing this more and more lately. And I know that space doesn't have Pat in it. I don't know what it is, but it's different than Pat. So.
Don't get in her way, John.
Hi, everyone. My name is Deborah.
So, it's a great talk. And at one point, you talked about how we begin to say, this one's on me. And I know that most of my life, and even now, this is just tipping the iceberg, but there's a nature that's always pushing what it knows and what it sees. This work, even if it's subtle, even if I don't even know how to say it, even if it's not overt, you got to do this, there's a subtle push in all of that, and it's violence. And I can see that starting to come awake to it is what changes that relationship. Like I've struggled with my family. Like I always wanted them to say, you're right, I've been wrong my whole life. I thought when we died and went to heaven, they would finally sit there and say, well, you were right all along. I seriously thought that.
That can be a long, long wait.
But the thing is that I want to say I've been wrong. This Debbie has been wrong. And my relationships with everybody in my family have changed. And you can see them blossom when there's no pressure being put on them. It's different. And the only, I'm getting emotional.
Don't look at me.
Help me.
She goes into the Scatman Crother things with her hands when she starts to get emotional.
Anyways, that's really all I had to say. But the only way you can, it wasn't like I tried to do something like, oh, I'm not going to push myself anymore. The only way that starts to change, I think, is when you really start to see the damage that you're doing to other people because of your will.
Real remorse is understanding how sorry you are without judging yourself for what you're sorry about. That's what real remorse is. It is sorrow without judgment. It is sorrow without comparison. That's real remorse.
We have this written question, Guy, that came in from Boris online, and Boris says, is the sense of progress in our journey of self-discovery another aspect of the false self through some comparison? At times I'm shocked at how things seem different to me as I continue on my journey, but other times when I'm irritated, angry, or otherwise seized by an emotion, I feel like I've just started. Is the Achilles heel, in these cases, my focus on being better?
I find a certain joy, a certain happiness in certain questions that come in. Because one can see that you can't see these things having been the same as you were. You begin to see what amounts to, at each stage, in quote, of development, in each level of unfolding, which is better than stage, in each movement, you begin to see in each movement a certainty and a suspicion at the same time. And you must always have suspicion when you have certainty. It's funny, Boris, I don't know when it was, just like 3 or 4 days ago, I was sitting in my chair in my house. I'm downsizing the foundation. People are very upset with me. My wife and I are moving to Florida. People, they say they don't want me to go. They're going to miss me. Got a house to sell. We have a foundation to sell, all these things to do. And as I was sitting there, I was going over in my mind, I should say, was going over certain things. And I watched this feeling come up. Boris, you'll understand this. And it was sort of like, it's okay. Everything's kind of okay. Kind of pleased. Kind of pleased with everything the way it is. Most of us live for that feeling. And I realized that what is dark in me, the hook doesn't drop from above in this world. The hook comes from below. Fishing for the unconscious soul to bite. And what did it want? It wanted me to identify with the feeling like everything's okay. Why do I have to identify with the feeling everything's okay if it's okay? If everything's in the right place, why do I need to derive any identity from it? If it's the right place, I'm in the right place, then I'm right, and that's the end of the story. Not everything's right. Because when everything's right, what follows? What follows? Everything's wrong. That's what Boris is saying. So yes, on one hand, the journey of self-discovery is the measurement of oneself. I'm getting it. I understand. All of those are pits along the path that you have to fall in. You can't avoid. If you look, who walks up to a pit and goes, "Well, that looks nice, dark and deep. I'm going to jump in there." Does anybody do that? Do you find yourself in pits that are dark and deep? How did I get there? Looked good to me. Well, who's the me that it looks good to? That's the question, isn't it? So one day, and this is right along the line of the three prayers, one day I'm sitting you're always moving. You don't know this, but there's never a moment in which the whole of you, in the literal sense, isn't being moved as is the entire cosmos. Everything in this movement. So here I am, and I believe I'm moving through time. You are not moving through time. Time is moving through you. You just don't understand that yet. You are experiencing the revelation of the totality of your possibilities in every moment. And here's this sense of movement. So am I not deceived if I think that I'm moving and I've made progress? Can I make progress if the truth is that my true nature doesn't move in one respect, but that is a field of perfect revelation where there's no distance between myself and the world that I see? Am I going someplace? But if I bite the idea that I've gone someplace and I've achieved something, you can be sure I'm going to get bit on the other side, can't you? Do you understand what I'm getting at? So that's the answer, Boris. It's okay. You can't have... Every question is predicated on the idea that you can avoid being you. Every question you ask is predicated on the idea that I can avoid the experience of myself. You can't avoid the experience of yourself. What you can do is be present to the experience of yourself so you can learn from the experience who you can no longer be. And the clearer that becomes, the more you'll walk through the world. And you will not be thinking about where you're going, about what he did, about what you have to get, about what happened yesterday. You'll be walking through the world awake and aware to the fact that you have one thing to do, and that is to see the pit appear before you step into it. And the pit is always the temptation of something that you're identified with. Always. Good. Anybody else? Come on, Sarah.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and
Looks pretty serious, Sarah.
I've been trying to articulate the thoughts as I feel that I'm not new to this work, but I'm new to this work.
That's 100% accurate. Is Christ never not new, or is Christ always new? Always new. And if Christ dwells within, if this living light dwells within, then it's always there. So there's no distance to travel to it. It's just a realization. So the realization seems like, I don't know this, but I've never known anything better than this. Because suddenly I am joined to myself, to my true self. And that's the beauty of the experience, really. That's where faith comes from. We just have to keep going through it. Yeah.
Yes. And when you've been talking about the yin and the yang, I feel that there's this dance of the self-love versus the self-loathing, and what I'm understanding is, what is the self? And
That's it.
I
What do they rotate around? See, that's the point. There's this constant shifting, right? And one minute I hate myself because I'm not loving like I thought I was. And then I love myself because I stopped you from loathing me, or whatever it may be that's going on. But there is, in every unseen in that, is not a separation between these movements, but that they are a singular movement, all of which is revealed to the center within them that is everywhere in it. Everywhere in it. No center to it, just the constant movement. Then you are where you can see all of this and recognize something tempting you to be one of this or the other, or a mix. But now you know what not to identify with. Now you become the observer of the movement instead of someone who's moved along by it and then trying to figure out where's the right place to be in this movement. There's no right place to be in the movement other than the witness of it.
So just unattach and watch.
Well, those are the words. If I try to, you can't, how many of you have practiced being unattached? Which is really like good for until something serious happens. So there's no strategy for being unattached, because then I'm attached to the strategy. So throw out unattached, throw out surrender. Let me see what the moment is asking me for in terms of action. If I see I'm hurting myself by identifying or wanting or pushing or demanding or regret, if I see that, the action's inherent in the actual revelation. Let me just learn what it means to move with the action. Then I'm not separate from all of that movement, and then it serves really the purpose of the experience.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Come on, Kate.
I was tempted to run up here, sorry. Hi, my name is Kate. Well, this I think will go along with what you were just talking with Sarah about. And I love it. I'm sure everyone will know what I mean when I say this. I feel like sometimes there's just like a little throwaway comment that Guy gives. And to me, it's like, pow, wow, it just opens up my brain.
Batman and robot. Pow!
Pow, bam. You are not moving through time, time is moving through you. I've heard that. But then he said, you are experiencing the revelation of the totality of yourself at every moment. And I don't know how to put this into words. I'm just going to say it. Maybe Guy can expand on it a little bit for me. It just explains, though, why it is how you can wake up one day and say, wow, 30 years went by so fast. I've been in Oregon for almost 30 years, and I'm about to leave Oregon. And the mind has this thought of time. 30 years went by like in a blink of an eye. And you look in the mirror and you're like, oh yeah, I can see that. But I feel like the same person. And that's because all throughout time, so to speak, I am always experiencing what I am, the totality of myself. So I'm different because I'm different now than I was 30 years ago. But it feels like I'm the same person because I am the same person. See, I'm not getting this quite right.
Oh, you're okay. Just you stumble forward.
Yeah, so it's just a little insight into why it is that you can kind of have these sort of mind-blowing moments sometimes when the mind can't actually reconcile it. The mind cannot reconcile this idea of time having passed because it is a construct of the mind. So I'm just going to sit with that and see what else I can learn.
These are just words, but I'll say them. Then maybe you'll see them. God, that which is divine, that which is all, reveals and experiences itself through its creation. Christ is the part of God, one with God, that sacrifices itself in creation so that the revelation of an endless creation can take place. So that that which was before you took a body will be there after you take a body. It was never not. The question is, do I leave this world knowing, meaning having realized what I am, what I have been given, and what is required of me for that gift, so that it may be given again? Or do I fight my way through this world and leave it afraid? The intensity, the depth, and the breadth of that question is something that individuals like yourself, you have to come to through your own work. You mustn't accept my question as your question. It may be the same, but it won't be formulated in the same way, because it'll be predicated on what you have perceived as true. And that's the only thing that matters. Bye.